we'll see.
Well, they're both possible.
Anything's possible. Okay, we're the Freedom Gardens. I'm Susan Estep, Heath Carey. Pretty much everybody here knows us. My husband, Mark Estep, and the beautiful Aluna Dunn. So one of the things that the Freedom Gardens, after having been disappointed in our attempt to negotiate with the Missoula County a lease arrangement for the Lalonde Ranch, which is 7 acres out in the development park on whatever that road is that goes to the airport. And there's Dino's next to it, and there's a car Tyler Chevrolet's out there, and it's pretty much all industrial or commercial property. And in the middle of it is this 7 acres that was and is the property of the county. And so if you look at this, you'll see the kind of history of how and what occurred after the county acquired the land. The original owners of the ranch asked for it to be preserved, and the quote from the documents that my husband, who is a researcher, pulled are, the proposal is for Missoula County to enter into an arrangement with the owner of that land so that Missoula County would obtain the land and dedicate it. So dedicate it meant to agriculture. And as of, we have looked at the plat and the lot description and all of those kinds of things, and there is no deed restriction on the property. So basically Missoula County can do whatever they want with it. It does have on it what is purported to be the oldest standing building in Missoula County. Little tiny blacksmith shop now, but was originally a house, and is worthy of preservation, as is the entire piece. So over the years, going back to 96, 21 years ago, there have been various plans for it, and as you can see in May of 2000, the commission considered putting animal control out there, which we never saw anything further about in any of the minutes and the research we did, so obviously that didn't happen. As a matter of fact, none of this happened. In 2005, there was a grant proposal submitted to create an interpretive center and a space where the visitor center could explain the history of agriculture in the Missoula Valley. That didn't happen. They were projecting a cost for that of about $100,000. And thought that they would be able to make that happen in 2006. That they, in this case, was Travel Montana. In 2005, they also, the BCC, the county commissioners, reviewed and approved a request to pursue a grant. And that was to do improvements on the large barn. There are 2 barns on the property, both of which are very usable with some remedial work that needs to be done. So obviously they were aware of that back in 2005. So the request for funding there was $20,000. There's no indication that that work was ever done either. So to keep moving forward, they in '06 approved a request from the Historic Preservation Officer to apply for a grant for $80,000. No record of the grant being received or any of the work being done. Moving on, Bodette looked at the structural conditions and what would be required to make it available for public purpose. The reason that's important is because one of the things that we at the Freedom Gardens were told by the county commissioners is that they had no idea what the magnitude of the repairs that were needed to those barns or any of the spaces to bring them back up to a standard where the public could use them. But clearly they did, and they have had this information for some time. Now let me be clear, there is only one of the county commissioners that was present for all of this and is still in office and has been in the meetings of the negotiating meetings with us, and that is Gene Curtis. Cola Rowley is a relatively new commissioner and relies on the information, I'm certain, of staff and Gene. And then Dave Strohmeyer, who was just elected and who took office in January, who in the meeting that we were in, that we finally realized that we were in a hopeless situation, clearly demonstrated that he had no notion of what had happened to the property or what the intentions of the property were, because he said, let's talk to the historic preservation, the museum, I'm sorry, the historic museum at the fort, and see if they want to preserve it, et cetera, et cetera. And if you skip forward a few years, you'll see in 2014, the county actually already has done that. And from the minutes of the meeting with the museum said, we believe that it is absolutely necessary and important to preserve this, but we would need a full mill, which is $200,000 a year, to even think about taking this on. Well, that didn't happen either. So then the request for ideas was put on the website. We have that here, asking somebody to please come forward and come up with something to use this property for. There were no responses. In early 2016, the Freedom Gardens responded, and that was at the suggestion of 2 of the county commissioners. So we didn't seek them out, they sought us out. There's more history here with the county surrounding the Freedom Gardens, and he's going to tell you about that. So how did we end up with the county commissioners suggesting that we look at the Lalonde Ranch? Another very important piece of this is that every year there has been a budget line item in the county budget for the Lalonde Ranch. And when asked, we were told that the money was rolled over if it wasn't used. However, I question, if in 13 there was $100,000 and 50 of it was rolled over in 14, where did the other 50 go? And if in 15 there was $200,000 that wasn't used, how did that turn into $50,000 in 16? And this year, 16, 17, the year that we wanted to take over stewardship, all we asked for was for them to help us make it safe using the money that was already in the budget. It was already budgeted, the $50,000. We added up everything that we could find in all the public records of money spent at the Lalonde, and the total over that 21 years is $90,000. Now, the county's not real good at keeping records, and they're not really very easily accessible, so it is possible that that is in some way not absolutely correct, but it's nowhere near $900,000. So why were they continuing to budget for a project that they had no intention of or were not paying any attention to in terms of moving forward? Freedom Gardens isn't going to be there, but Lalonde Ranch is, and we want it preserved. So Heath wants to talk about Freedom Gardens and why we want it preserved, why we want to do all this stuff.
So I recognize a lot of you guys out there, and I appreciate all of you coming. For those of you who aren't super familiar with me, let me give you a little bit of background on Freedom Gardens. I kind of was introduced to the whole fairgrounds staff in 2013 when I helped set up a farmer's market in the wintertime out there, so that growers who grow food locally can actually extend their economic drive, if you will, by being able to sell their product on the edges of their growing seasons. And while I was doing that, I got to meet Steve Earle, who was the superintendent out of the fairgrounds for a while. And I asked Steve one day, I said, why is this hub of county agriculture, why does this sit here for over 300 days a year with minimal use on it, but then for 14 days there's like, come look at our agricultural pride in Missoula County. Why is there not agriculture here? And the history of the fairgrounds is that at one time there was agriculture there. There was a greenhouse there that grew the flowers for the fair, and that grew it for the fairgrounds. And it was run by volunteers. And so I said, Steve, why don't we start that again? And Steve agreed to it. And we actually signed a contract in August of 2013 for that. And during that time, we created 450 square feet of what we call specialized cold frames. So it's a cold frame based off of growing in Maine, which has a similar latitude to us. And we were able to grow greens not only into the month of November, but we also kept those greens alive throughout the winter. So we knew at that point that we were on to something. So in the following year, we acquired over 300 fruit tree rootstock. And we began teaching people how to utilize these cold frames and grow food.
And worms.
And worms. We did a worm composting deal as well. And we built a 2,000-gallon aquifer of water that fed a gravity feed drip irrigation system that required no power. And we grew over 800 pounds of food that we donated to the food bank. And we felt that this was an admirable thing to do for the county, because if we want the world to be a better place, then we have to be the change that we want to see in that place. And I think that we all realize now that we are living in changing times, like times that could change really in an instant. And I think, and I believe my board thinks, that building resilience in our community is the one way that we can offer a path forward for everyone, instead of turning upon ourselves or each other when those times might change. And that is what we started to do at the fairgrounds. And interestingly enough, going into the third year now, so we actually by the end of the second year had acquired a commercial aquaponics system by a family who believed in our endeavors and wanted to donate a food growing system to the public to grow food for the public and to utilize as a teaching strategy for the public as well. And on our third year, we received a letter from Dory Brownlow, who was an attorney, or is an attorney for the county, telling us that our lease with the fairgrounds was not legally binding because it was signed by the superintendent and needed to go through the Board of County Commissioners. So in answer to that, we talked to a lawyer who then met the county, and thus there was this first thorn in, the nonprofit trying to utilize public land to grow food and educate the public. And I feel that that's maybe where things started to turn awry for our organization. Also during that year, our ally at the fairgrounds, Steve Earle, had to step down and was replaced by Todd Garrett.
Actually, there was an interim guy who got fired because he got into a thing with a rodeo queen.
Fair enough.
But that was a short guy. He was not there very long. Sorry, I know the whole thing.
Yeah,
I knew the girl.
So we kind of stumbled a little bit on the third year. And on the third year, we needed to talk to the county commissioners because our lease was only good for 3 years to figure out what the next step was, right? Because if we're building resiliency doesn't get dug up in 3 years and moved somewhere else. That's not resiliency. And so we met with all of the county commissioners, and Stacy Rye and Cole Raleigh were in support of our project. In fact, they were in support of us being at the fairgrounds, but in those meetings, we were told about the Lalonde Ranch. Well, have you thought about the Lalonde Ranch? And our reply to that was, the fairgrounds is a more central location to our community. It also stands as a pillar for our community's agricultural investment, our investment into the future. And we want to be there. We want to be at the fairgrounds. But it turned out that we couldn't be at the fairgrounds, and we were told that by the county commissioners. And in fact, if you look at what we've done at the fairgrounds since we haven't even been there, we've knocked down buildings and we've paved parking lots. So the county commissioners not we, but yeah, well, we the public, it's our tax dollars that are paying for those parking lots. It's our tax dollars that are knocking down those buildings. So we moved forward to the Lalonde Ranch. 7 acres. It's bigger than the fairgrounds for us to use. We were always stuck in 3 acres there. So we moved towards the Lalonde Ranch. If you came up and looked at the front of the table, we came up with a whole new set of drawings. We actually felt like we were getting somewhere with the county now, who had actually mentioned to us, hey, there's this Lalonde Ranch. So we invest our time into the Lalonde Ranch. We invest our time into drawing up the documents again. We invested our time in due diligence to talk to the county commissioners, to talk to the county employees, to the lawyers, to discuss our plan that includes a greenhouse now, because on year 3, that was our like shining moment. We actually got a commercial greenhouse to house our commercial aquaponics system. So the pieces are falling together and our land is shaky. But now the county has suggested the Lalonde Ranch, it feels like we're rolling, you know. So last year, we didn't get to do anything out at the fairgrounds really because we were investing our time in getting preparations made for the Lalonde Ranch. So we lost an entire growing season. We lost an entire season of education, essentially. Luckily, there's an organization out there called Blue Sky Stewardship, and Stefan, it's great to see you here, who kind of picked up the ball a little bit and helped move forward educational components of agriculture. And yeah, like we can think in the back of our heads too, there's Garden City Harvest, but I've been quoted, and I'll say this again, like if this town can have as many breweries as it has, this town can also have a lot of growing organizations that are growing food and trying to do things for the public. And that's something I feel like all of us recognize that are here too, you know, and I think it's an important thing to share that with people, you know, like we actually live in a community that fosters drinking more than it fosters growing food. And we want to grow food for the poor, you know? We want to grow food for the people who can't go to the grocery stores. So this is how we're looking at the Lalonde Ranch and moving into having a signed lease. Our communications, you know, they're rough at best. The county, they don't really seem to want to play fair. At least that was our first impression with the lawyer in year 3. So Mark and I were very diligent at staying the course and going to the meetings, and we're up to the end of last year at this point, and the county commissioners are seemingly in support. Stacy Rye is still on the board at this point, and we were told to look at the barns on the property, right? So now we're back to these barns that Susie talked to you about a little bit. They're not the best looking barns, but they're not the best looking barns because they've sat there for over 20 years without any type of attention whatsoever, not even a fresh coat of paint. So they are historic in the fact that they're part of that agricultural piece, and we could turn those into something that would work as a classroom and also a historic kind of designation for that property. So to us, we heard prior to this point that it was an option to knock those buildings down. Because maybe we could build a new building for cheaper than it would take to preserve part of our county's history. And there's a giant fucking gaping hole over there that shows us what that option is. So we were vehemently against that, and so we paid to have an architect go out there to look at those barns again, to look and compare with the Bodette one that our tax dollars paid for. And our engineer told us we could fix those barns. And not only could we fix them, but we could fix them for a reasonable price. And we were willing to take that cost on ourselves. And so that piece happened, and the county was going to fix a well so that we could irrigate. And they were going to take care of the electric in the house, which their own county employee said that it was scary at best. Again, it was old electric. It's an old piece of property. It's historical. We know that historical electrical likes to start fires, you know, like these are reasonable requests when people go to take over a management of a piece, which is exactly what we offered. We would take care of this county land, build community gardens, put a commercial greenhouse on there, put a commercial aquaponics system in there, plant over 300 fruit trees, and teach the public and offer a podium for local food growing experts to come to and to teach out to the public so that we could feed the public and we can educate the public on how to use these two things to make food, you know, bottom line, to make food. And it's one of my own personal, like, maybe call it deviant feelings. I think if people spend more time with their hands on the dirt, then maybe we'll take more time considering the world around us and our neighbors and our community. And so we went with high hope to meet the county this year in February, and
There was a new commissioner, by the way.
Yes,
Stacy Rye was no longer, who had been a big supporter of ours, was no longer the county commissioner. She was replaced by Dave Strohmeyer.
which was curious that we had to wait until February to have that meeting, but, you know, I don't really feel like pointing fingers necessarily is the most positive or efficient thing to do at this point. But Dave Strohmeyer, who wasn't involved in any of the negotiations up to that point, brought up the fact that we had spent all of our time and our investments on a request for information.
Ideas.
Request for ideas, I'm sorry. A request for ideas. And somehow that is legally different in the public eye than a request for proposals. So we found ourselves in a conundrum suddenly and said, well, hold on a second. The last time we talked, you had all voted to give us a lease, and we had spent the last year in negotiations for what that lease would look like. Are you telling us that that is now not indeed what is happening? And I call what happened next the fastest train wreck I've ever seen. When one of my public officials, that's paid for by your tax dollars and my tax dollars, unloaded on us like we were a bunch of fifth graders and we had just been caught in the girls' locker room. And it was the most bizarre feeling in the world to me as a person that, like, I've walked around in the city's wastewater building Montana's first permitted land application of wastewater behind the wastewater treatment plant. There's not a lot of people in this room that can say they've done anything like that. I've built my own business that's successful, and I don't deserve to be yelled at and treated like a child by my public official that I pay, that you pay. You guys wouldn't yell at me like that? But here I was being yelled at by a county commissioner. Here my friends were, who were also professional in this town, were being yelled at by a county commissioner. And we had no choice but to stand up from that table and walk away. I had hoped that we would call upon all of you for your help when we had a piece of land that we could plant trees in and make a difference on for the community around us. Unfortunately, I am not sure that working with the county is any longer an option. But all of you are here tonight because you want to be a piece of your local community and you want to make a difference. And I want to tell you that we can make a greater difference locally than we can nationally. And I look out and I see a lot of you, and a lot of you are my friends, and I know a lot of you have been putting time in out there for the feds and the people that are going into the Supreme Court and the people who are now ruling our educational system, and also the people who have made change, which was already giant and looming in the face of the climate and how we grow our foods, to now a crazy madman with a red button who could create a nuclear war. I know, it's funny, right? I want to laugh too. I want to wake up tomorrow and think that this is not the world I live in, but it is the world that all of us live in. And I, for one, vote that we work together instead of against each other. And right now, I am asking all of you tomorrow to call your county commissioners and ask them, where is this RFP? Where is the RFP on the land that we own? We've been paying for a county employee to live there. We've been paying for the grass to be mowed. We would be paying you to cut that grass, to grow food for the public, to teach the public. And I'm also asking you to sign this petition that puts an agricultural conservation easement on that land. We might not be able to work with the county, but that doesn't mean that somebody else can't work with the county, can't grow food for the public. And if anything, maybe we're just an inspiration to a really great idea. And that's pretty much all I have to say, guys.
So our goal, our goal is not to walk away and say, oh, okay, well, never mind, the power is too great, they win, we'll do something else, which we will, we are doing, and we actually have lots of ideas about where the Freedom Gardens will be next. But the Lalonde Ranch belongs to the county, it belongs to us, and it is a wonderful, wonderful piece of our history. And the fact that they've considered it to be where animal control would be placed, okay. And then in one of the meetings, we were told that they had at one point considered it to be a drop-off for the hazardous waste days in Missoula, and that we could all take our hazardous waste and leave it on that 7 acres. Luckily, that, for whatever reason, never moved forward, as a lot of things don't. And we want to not leave the Lalonde and, go with our tail between our legs. We want the land to have a conservation easement for agriculture put on it. It'll cost the county almost nothing. They own the land. The sale price will be reduced if they intended to sell it by limiting it to the use of, to its use for agriculture. But at the end of the day, that deed is wide open right now, and they can do anything they want with that 7 acres, including sell it to a developer or put hazardous waste out there. So that's the real purpose of this meeting, is that we want help. We want you guys to help us get the county commissioners to put a conservation easement on that piece of land. And then whatever happens next, I don't know. But I also want them to put that RFP out there so that maybe somebody else can answer it and do the work there that we want it to do. Yes, we love questions. Request for proposal.
Okay.
So they put out a request for ideas, which I guess has a little nuance to it versus a request for proposal. We responded to the request for ideas that sat on their website for 2 years before, and no one responded to it, with a item by item response to each of the things that they were requesting that someone come forward willing to do. And we weren't looking for money. We were not asking the county to fund us. We have private funding, we're a 501c3. Yes, we thought that they should take the money that was already in the budget for 16-17 and fix the barns. But when we found that they were not necessarily willing to do that, we were willing to raise the money to do it. And they shut us down even on that.
So now, is there an RFP?
We haven't seen it yet.
Not
So
yet.
right now, it's just sitting
They
there.
want
And
it to-
they don't really know what they're gonna do,
No.
and they don't really want anybody's input.
Right.
Not particularly.
No, I think that truthfully, they hope that it'll just go away. There was an article in the Missoulian about our frustrating experience, which I think got a lot of people interested. Out of that, we've had 3 different landowners come to us and say, we've got land. The Freedom Gardens has opportunities that are actually quite wonderful, and maybe this will turn out to be a better thing anyway. We're good with that. But my, Heath's, Mark's, and Elena's passion around preserving something of this significance historically, I just watched them tear down the Merck. And, they don't have to do that out there. They don't have to. But sheer inefficiency, laziness, the honeypot that they can dip back into at the end of every year when it's not used for Lalonde and use it for whatever else they want to use it for, seems to be more important to them than having that become what it could be. Questions?
Sorry.
No, please.
For the budget here that you guys have listed for Lalonde, you're saying that these are the budgets that they're receiving every year?
That's the line item that they publish each year for what they plan to spend there.
And you mentioned earlier that they haven't spent nearly that number,
No.
that 900,000 at all?
No.
No.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now, again, the response that we got was that we roll it over. So if we don't spend the 50 this year, we put it in the budget for next year. However, you'll note, and these are all taken from county records, that there are a couple of years where it was 150, then it was 50, then it was 200, and then there was 50. Okay, so where's the rollover piece? Where did that go? Well, I haven't been able to get an answer out of the county on that, and we've asked the question directly. So I'm less concerned with that because I know that there's a lot of interesting things that happen in the budgeting process of every government entity, and that it would be free and clear money because it's land sale money. It's also a TIF district, which if you don't know what that is, it's a tax increment financing district, which because the county then sold parcels of land out there in the development park to other buyers, the brewery, is it Big Sky?
Yeah.
Big Sky Brewery is out there. The money that Big Sky paid for that went to the county of Missoula, and then that money's unrestricted. And then the tax increment financing piece that was done, again, I won't bore you with that, but I'm happy to talk to anybody who'd like to understand tax increment financing better. But let's just say there's money there. There's been money there all along, and they have allowed this to just deteriorate into nothing. And we wouldn't know that, and probably no one in this room would know it, and no one in the county of Missoula would know it, if indeed we hadn't had this horrendous experience, and if the Missoulian hadn't written about it.
So has any work been done? Has any money been spent by the county on the property?
Mark knows exactly, because he's gone through all of the actual improvements.
All I could find in the past 20 years is $91,000. They spent some money on a roof. They spent 20 grand on a caretaker who lived there and was paid to live there and do some work on the property, but I don't know what work was done. According to what I can find out from permits that were issued for that property, there are only one for a roof remodel, re-roofing, a ADA accessible bathroom remodel,
Which isn't.
and a porch remodel, which was falling down. And that's all I can find the permits were issued for. Instead, they've spent money on knocking out the weeds, mowing the grass. They've had the asbestos abated in the house. You know, it adds up to 90,000.
Another interesting piece is the house has historic significance. It was built in 1935. It's a brick house. And my husband and I
Far
have,
earlier than that.
I'm sorry?
Much earlier than that.
Oh, it is? I didn't know it was one of those
No,
things.
it's
It's our house, okay. Anyway, we've restored houses in Missoula. We've been given 3 historic preservation awards for restoring houses in Missoula. We get how to fix this, and we were willing to restore that house back to what it should have been, with the ground floor being a museum, an agricultural museum, and the top floor being quarters for whoever was going to caretake the property. And we were willing to take that on ourselves. I mean, I'm not going to put up any more sheetrock. Question.
Has there been any cultural work done on this property at all in respect to the State Historic Preservation Office, and making sure everything that the county has done on that project, or on that property,
Good
falls
question.
under
Well, the
section
Historic
106?
Preservation Office hasn't been involved much in it at the state level. I did have an email with Peter Brown, who is in the State Historic Preservation Office. This is his jurisdiction. I also know the director, Mark Baumler, and CC'd him on it. And we talked about what's been done there, and they don't really have any say in it right now. And I had talked to them about grant opportunities and funding for restoration, and they said that there was not really much out there, and that it wasn't likely that we're going to find much.
Okay, but no one's done
They've done nothing
an
yet.
assessment for the National Historic Registry?
No, they
Or anything
did,
like that?
we asked specifically if they would help us out on a grant application I was putting in from the Preservation Forum, from the Historic Preservation Society nationally, and they declined. They wouldn't say that we were involved with them, and they said, no, we won't make that commitment to represent ourselves as being historically minded, you know.
Okay.
And the person who is, I'm going to bring you all the way back around now in this story. Remember the woman, the lawyer, Dory Brownlow, who wrote us the letter that said, you got to leave the fairgrounds? She was the assistant district, she was the deputy district attorney under Fred Van Valkenburg. When he was no longer county attorney and Kristen Pabst was elected, Dory ended up working for the county commissioners and was given the development park to oversee, although she has no economic development experience. And she's paid $105,000 a year out of the development park budget. And she didn't like us because we pushed back on the fairgrounds. And so if you have to come up with some really, outside the honey pot budgeting, we got sideways with somebody who thought that she should put us down. So another interesting fact, but again, she has no economic development experience, she has no historic preservation experience, and yet she is paid $105,000 a year out of the budget from out there. Go figure.
It sounds like this may be a good opportunity to get out of that. And it sounds like you have. I came
No,
here
we're
hoping
done,
to
we're
help
done,
you.
we're done, we're done,
Maybe
we're
No,
done.
we're
get
done,
that
yeah.
back into that, I'll go talk to the commissioner.
No,
We're done, we're not going back, and we will move on. But it's too egregious to let that piece of property just be ignored, go the way all of the historic importance, a lot of the important historic archival buildings and things that keep us tied to the past in this valley. And the past in this valley is agricultural. And the future should be, or may have to be, depending on what happens with climate change.
11 years ago, they had an architect in town here come and assess the needs for the buildings, and he put in his assessment was basically that the log cabin needed a lot of structural work for the sills were rotting. Of course, they weren't concrete then, they were just logs. But it needs to be shored up and maintained if it's going to be preserved at all. And that was 11 years ago he did that, and they've never done anything since then.
And again, this is reported to be the oldest standing building in Missoula County.
It won't stand much longer if
It's not gonna
it's
stand much
neglected.
So we want everybody to get fired up, we want people to help us do something right that we can do that's within our control, that's within our power, that's within our ability as taxpayers to say, gee, come on guys. First of all, protect the property. Second of all, put out that RFP that you used as an excuse not to let us be there. And let's find out whether or not somebody else can use the property. And that's the thing we want. We have a petition. I will stand outside the farmer's market all summer long with that petition if I have to.
So if they put out an RFP, will you?
No.
No.
So you're
We will not
you're not
respond.
interested in it anymore?
We don't want to talk to the
I
county.
don't
They
want to fight
lie,
with them.
Okay.
they renege on agreements, they're just.
No, we're done.
Okay.
We're done with them. That's not why we're here tonight. That's not why I've put all this time and money and effort into this. It's because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for carrying this forward and bringing it out to Missoula and just letting everybody know what you guys went through and kind of, letting us know that there's, tax money that's kind of, seems like it's disappearing, through this ranch. And I think that's really important. So, even though you guys are totally done with it, I just think that's really honorable that, you're bringing it forward. No, honestly, because you could just drop it and leave it, but,
Most people do, and I think that's
That's
what, I
right,
believe that that's what
yeah.
Gene and Curtis expected us to do. And we didn't, and we're not going to. I'm not going to, and he's not going to, and Mark's not going to, and Malaya's not going to. So there's 4 of us, and we're gonna keep at it until we get what we need and preserve the space, and hopefully somebody can use it. Other than us. But no,
So
I won't
basically
respond.
what you want is just to kick the commissioners in their butts and have them spend some money on it, do the right thing.
Put a conservation
buy it,
easement on it for that.
So you want the
Protect it, I
easement.
want the easement.
And then put out an RFP that somebody else can,
Improve it, do
okay.
something appropriate with that easement.
And, again, the TIF district expired in 2018. Another mystery here. There is TIF money. There is money. Money is not was not the issue. As far as we were concerned, I didn't even anticipate wanting to work with any of those entities. We are a 501c3 and I have a long history of fundraising for rather large projects. And I didn't, you know, that wasn't the problem. But they didn't want us or our money.
Yeah, tip money, I know MRA, do they have anything, are they doing sidewalks out of it?
I met with Ellen Buchanan and it's separate from
Yeah.
what she does.
Yeah, because I think her boundaries are different.
And she and I talked about it. That TIF district, when it sunsets, it won't be, it'll be 2018. There's $1,470,000 left of the tax increment dollars. And the county wants to spend that money on buying another piece of property that is at the end of the development park, closer to the airport. However, and that would then use the money from the TIF district as opposed to it going back to the people within the development park, which, you know,
Which is not fair.
that's not really fair either. But by buying that piece of land, then in theory, they can in the future sell more development out toward the airport. That property's been appraised for $800,000, but they seem to want to spend $1,470,000 on it. And I do not doubt that maybe the intention may have something, you know, other than the best possible, you know, use of the land. Or, I don't know what their plans are, honestly, but I do know they want to spend the rest of that TIF money quick before it expires, and then they'll get that other piece of land, and then that'll belong to the county, us, the taxpayers. But I don't know what the end result, why that's a good end result.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me, so the original owners said they wanted it to be historic,
They asked that
but
it,
the wording wasn't good enough to live up
there-
to the standards?
the agreement was, I never found any hard evidence about the, what exactly the terms of the agreement were, but the representative from the Office of Planning and Grants, who I quote there, said that the arrangement they had come to with the Dodd Development Company, and he's the son-in-law of the Gooden Levine couple who owned the ranch in the 50s. And he asked that it was dedicated. Now, Susie said that, that's what I read, that's all I see, dedicated. But to me, that means that it's, you know, preserved somehow, dedicated to the family or to the county or something. His concern was that he was swapping land for it, and he might not be able to sell his property, which was the land that Lalonde Ranch sits on. And in order to conserve it, he would swap property for value with another 9-acre parcel near the airport somewhere, I don't know exactly which parcel it is. But that would satisfy him if they would dedicate that property.
And the term dedicated is,
We assume means to some kind of historic agricultural use.
And then there's never any other,
It's pretty
Mention of
sketchy
it.
records.
you know, I've gone through the commissioners' journals. They have a daily journal of every meeting, public meeting they have, and those are signed every day by a commissioner, you know, and Gene Curtis signs most of them. And I've read them all since 1995, and the only information I have about the Dodd Development Company is that they were in an agreement to swap the property with the county, and that the county agreed on a parcel that they, in 95, they ended up with a parcel. 9.2 acres of Dodd property located adjacent to the development park is all.
is there any, like, I don't know, relatives?
Yes, I met the grandson.
That would clarify what their grandparents meant?
We'd like to do that, I haven't gotten.
I met the
any far
grandson
with that.
briefly, not very long ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. He'd seen the paper, he'd seen the article in the paper, and came up to talk to me, and said, you know, those are my grandparents, I guess the Goodens. And it was at a social, you know, event, political event actually, and I have not had a chance to reach back out to him and talk to him. I actually had hoped to get it together to have him here tonight, and I didn't have a chance to.
He was asking if this land into agricultural dedication would be better, easier to argue if you had that.
Yeah, well, this is all I have to work with.
Well,
so
we've been
far,
told
but
that the county's intention is for it to be used for ag. Intentions, I mean, the road to is paved with.
Yeah, what is their mechanism, because I'm used to doing things with 5 Valley Land Trust.
Well,
we
it
call
was the same thing.
Conservation easement.
Same thing, so you can,
The same structure.
same structure, we need a steward, we would need either Five Valleys or the Bitterroot District to agree to steward the property in perpetuity. There would be some cost attached to that. The big cost around the easement process is the reduction in value of the piece of property because now it cannot be developed. With personal property, and currently a big piece of the open space bond money went to the Deshaw family just a little past us, past there, and they were reimbursed $1,200,000 for the devaluation of their property because it will be preserved as ag land in perpetuity. Five Valleys Land Trust will steward that through to the future, and that's.
Does that then reduce the tax base and reduce the TIF funding out there?
Well, you understand, it belongs to the county. It doesn't
Yeah.
have any tax
And no,
base.
there-
The county doesn't
yeah,
pay
that's right, that
taxes to
parcel is
themselves.
not.
Yeah, they don't pay taxes to themselves. Any other questions? Well, thanks, guys. Have pizza. We got lots.
Yes, please help
Have
yourself.
some pizza. And